Hello and welcome to Unacademy. I welcome you all to the Hindu analysis. Good morning to all of you. We have an interesting set of 4 to 5 topics to cover. As it was a Saturday newspaper, we have very peculiar articles but quite interesting for UPSC. But before we begin, as always, remember that the 55% discount is running under the Resolve 2025 program for 12 months, 23,999. And if you take 18 months or more after paying 25,999, you also get what is called as CSE Assure. Under that, if you don't crack the 2026 examination, you will get an extension for free next year. There are certain conditions under it. You can check it in the description box. The idea is if 12 months, you do not get CSE Assure. If you take 18 months and more, you get CSE Assure. The idea that if you it is a guarantee that we will give you the result. And if you are following the basic features and the basic conditions under it, as it is, you will clear the examination. But if you don't, still you get 1 year extension. You can use the code IIS English to get mentorship sessions from the team and be attributed to us. So I hope that you will use this code and you will use this opportunity. If you are a first, second, third year student or a student in, you can say, having 3 to 4 years in your hand, you should use this opportunity to take an 18 months plus, you can say, subscription. Thereafter, as always, tomorrow and 29 December, we have the UCSC. Please, for every candidate who is giving 2025 attempt, please use this moment. It's like a free test series. Give the examination either at 11 a.m. or 5 p.m. Last time, the whole, you can say the Unacademy platform crashed because of the volume of students giving the examination. That was a good thing. And therefore, you should understand one thing, which is that with so many students giving this examination, you will get an idea where you are, because you get a specialized dashboard also. As much as that, you also get a chance to win different prizes. For anybody who's 2026, use this to get up to 90% scholarship. So the idea is, if you are using this code, you get 55 plus Assure. If not, this is also a new entry point for you. Okay. For anybody and whosoever is finding it difficult to get the PDF for this session, you'll find it in this Telegram group. Just scan this code and join it. Every day, I am pushing the PDF of this session within the next 2 to 3 hours as soon as the session is over. Now, let's talk about the 7 topics we have to cover. Good morning to all of you. We have to first talk about education system and how there's a marginalization because of fees increasing, and there's a lot of contours in this. Then we'll talk about the Asian elephant and the regime which has been constructed around that. Then we'll talk about the detention policy, which we just recently talked about on 24th of December. There's an interesting editorial about it. Then a certain indicator is showing that inequality in India vis-a-vis rural and urban is changing. Then we will talk about the smart cities mission and how there is a certain study which has come from the IIM Bangalore. Then something where China is asking us to trust them. Very problematic, but a dam, the Medong Dam, which is now in the news. And last but not the least, if you are scared of needles, maybe IIT-Bombay has a solution for that. So we have 7 articles, all you can say both prelims and mains oriented, but some of them have more systemic issues related to them. Therefore, we will go into the detail of the mains oriented topics. And when it comes to the prelims orientation, I have one MCQ for you in this topic where I'll be discussing tributaries. So Brahmaputra tributaries, please do revise, because I'm going to ask you a MCQ on this. I'll push a poll when I'll reach the 6th topic. Okay, we can start, right? Everyone's here? Yes, sir. Okay. So the first topic is called marginalized by caste, marginalized in education. Now, there's a lot of backstory here. 2 things which you should understand. First things first is that in India, we have what we call a strata of the community and the society who have been discriminated since the later Vedic period. Because of the Varna system, thereafter its, you can say, transformation into the caste system, the Jati caste system, we had a strata of people who were tagged as, during the national movement, as depressed classes. The Jyotiba Phule used the word Dalit for that. But we have, you can say, historical precedents that systemic discrimination and social exclusion was followed for women also, and for the lower varnas and the lower castes also. That is an undeniable fact. That was the need, that in turn creates the need for the social reform movement, the depressed class movement. Thereafter Dr. Ambedkar, you have Shri Narayan Guru, you have Periyar, who become very important personalities in this larger landscape of Jyotiba Phule, Savitribai Phule, very important personalities who changed the way depressed class are looked at and how we look at Hinduism, in Indian society and everything in that regard. Now, this is where after independence, we needed positive discrimination in the form of the SC, ST reservation which exists in India. And thereafter, through the Mandal Commission, we got also OBC. We had a very long conversation about the concept of reservation. There was a podcast where we discussed the relevance of reservation in 2024. I don't know if you've watched that. If you haven't, you should. It's an interesting conversation about the concept of social justice, which is basically embodied in the process of reservation. So I think there is no one who can deny that, yes, we have made strides when it comes to, you can say, better depressed class reforms and depressed class integration. But India still has to go a very long way. And if I basically quote you data, it is indicative of the fact that there is still need for reform and there is still need for positive discrimination, reservation, and therefore a need to protect these communities and empower them. 92% of all manual scavenging and, you can say, activities were previously associated to the depressed classes is still being done by depressed classes only. So if you look at the job profiles and the employment profiles of the different, you can say, departments and the positions which were previously enmarked for a certain strata of society, still there is a lot of recruitment which happens from the same community. So there is systemic, you can say, violence, systemic issues, systemic discrimination, and it is our constitution which tries to transcend it by removing untouchability from 15, 16, 17, be it the, you can say, right to life itself has this idea that we should give equal opportunity and access to everyone. I think we all can agree to this aspect that we still have a little bit, or not even little bit, still a far way to go when it comes to depressed class reintegration, lower caste and lower varna reintegration, and when it comes to perception also. We still, if you live in the urban areas, maybe caste is not an important indicator. We have multiple cases of grooms being killed because they were following a certain high caste tradition. When it comes to honor killing, when it comes to caste-based violence, there is violence which is happening in India today based on caste. Maybe you are immune to it, but that doesn't mean that it does not exist. This is the first aspect of this article. And it is not an, you can say, overreach to say that when it comes to the education system, there is accessibility problem. There is an accessibility problem. Therefore, if I have to put in 100% effort from an upper caste to reach to a certain institution, maybe from a lower varna or from a vulnerable, you can say, vulnerable group, or from what is called a particularly vulnerable group, be it the SCs, STs, maybe that family has to push even more, 200, 300%. And because historically they have been in a way discriminated against, the access to resources is also less. Meaning, if I say that the fees is 1 lakh rupees, maybe 1 lakh rupees may not be a very big amount for a certain strata of the society, but for first generation, you can say lower varna, lower caste students whose parents have in a way saved every rupee to send their children to the premier institutes such as IITs, IIMs, or even central universities, that 1 rupee, that 1 lakh is a very big amount, very, very big amount. And that is where for education, the idea of educational loans for very basic amounts is also in that regard there. Debt based on, or debt trap based on education is there, very well represented in multiple movies also. There is a problem. The problem is that when it comes to systemic discrimination and when it comes to the concept of accessibility to premier education institutions, there is a lot which has to be tackled. Too many obstacles, too many hills to be climbed. This is the first thing. This aspect is not specific to this article. it is basic history and social issues and social justice. I think this, if you are not aware of, then there's an innocence in you which needs to be now in a way removed, that the Indian society has transcended these issues. When it comes to gendered, when it comes to caste-based issues, we are still somehow there only. The things may have got, in a way, more intrinsic, have got masked, but still are there. Systemic discrimination would mean that the system itself is geared in such a way that it privileges certain people or privileges a certain strata. Meaning, if there is a basic assumption that you have to come from an English private school, this is called systemic discrimination. Accessibility to a private school itself is problematic, plus English would be a very difficult thing for certain strata of the Indian society to do it. That's called systemic, means system, and then discrimination, which is inbred into the system itself. So I want everybody here to agree to disagree or agree that we all know this aspect of Indian society as a problem, because then I'll add more aspects to it. This is where I intrinsically want you to assume, or at least I want to assume that you understand, that we all understand that there is systemic discrimination within the educational system, and therefore when it comes to the way in which we live today, there is discrimination happening. We may not be aware of it, but it is happening. Great. So all of you are on the same page with me. Now, this article does not try to tackle this issue. This article rather talks about how higher education in India is becoming more and more problematic. How higher education in India is becoming more and more problematic. The way we define higher education is, it is the dream of every parent to send their children to IITs, to IIMs, to central universities such as BHU, Delhi University, thereafter University of Calcutta, University of Madras. These are premier institutions, one of the most important institutions for any form of upward mobility for people. So therefore, when we talk about IITs, IIMs and central university, higher education in India is now becoming problematic. Now, before 2018, 2019, there used to be a certain system which is called the subsidization of higher education in central universities. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, for example, I am Delhi University. Now, I have to run my colleges. I have to run the whole university itself. There's a cost for it. So what used to happen was that UGC used to give what is called grants to the DU, which then was dispersed to the colleges. Now, what happened was that if the fees should have been 15,000 per semester, the condition on which UGC used to transfer money to the Delhi University colleges was that we are subsidizing the tuition fees. We are subsidizing the tuition fees, or let's say we are just subsidizing the fee of the student in multiple forms. And therefore, if it was 15,000, it used to become rupees 7,000 or 8,000 rupees per semester. The reason for that is, this grant has no cost to the college. Delhi University has mandated that you have to subsidize the semester fees because we are getting a grant for that only. So DU had no obligation to repay it, and UGC had to incentivize higher education and accessibility, because maybe 15,000 is too much, 7,000 to 8,000 is half of what it is. This model is based on one-way transfer of money. But in a country where we all have agreed that there is systemic discrimination, this system is good or bad. As much as it may be wasteful, as much as it may be the aspect of one-way transfer, there may be misappropriation also. But in a system in which we have discrimination, this system is needed. It is positive. It is a good thing that at least we are still trying to subsidize our education so that people who cannot pay 15,000 can pay 7 to 8,000 rupees. However, the same government in its previous term changed this structure, saying it goes against the basic principles of economic logic, and therefore we cannot subsidize education at this level, that it creates a burden on the government itself. They rather came up with this model, which is called HEFA. HEFA is called Higher Education Financing Agency. The Higher Education Finance Agency or Financing Agency, HEFA. Now, under HEFA, what happens is that the MHRD, now called the Ministry of Education, along with Canara Bank, they basically create a capital pool. That capital pool can be managed by Canara Bank in such a way that it pulls in money from the government, invests it, gives some form of return, and thereafter that capital is thereafter pushed to the educational institutions. But there was a catch. The catch was that when now the HEFA gives money to the universities, it is not a grant in aid. It is a low interest loan. Low interest loan. And this is where the problem now starts. Why they scheme to introduce like free ration, like the students. We'll talk about that UPSC. Let me develop this whole concept. The idea is previously this was grant in aid. Now it is a loan which is given by HEFA to a university, which has to be repaid back to the HEFA at a low interest rate. Now you tell me, basic logic, use your basic economic logic. Will the universities have the incentive to keep their fees very, very low? Think of it. Previously, they used to keep the fees very low because it was a condition. Now, if I transfer anything to the student, it will thereafter automatically change the nature of that transfer. Because if I'm subsidizing the fees, of a person, then I have to repay an interest on that fees. And this is where the author argues that with the change of the funding landscape of higher education, the problem is that there has been an exponential, if not substantial, increase in the fees of premier institutions. And he has data for that. I'll give you that also. But the premise is this. This article, as it says, marginalized by caste, marginalized by education. Both aspects. Caste is one marginalization, but the education system is also marginalizing them because now the cost of education has gone up and nobody talks about it. I can guarantee to you that in the same institution you are doing or would have done your BA honors, BTech, year on year there would have been a change in the fees itself. And maybe your juniors today pay a much larger fees than what you paid. When I was in Delhi University fees used to be 8,000 for the whole year, meaning 4,000 per semester if you go into semester system. Now the same Delhi University takes 26 to 30,000 rupees for one semester. So it has gone from 7 to 8,000 a year to 60,000 a year. In certain institutions, 25, 26, there is a doubling. And this is where the interesting aspect is that the author points out that let's look at the data from the IITs. He says that in the past 4 to 5 years, since 2016, there has been a 200% increase in the fees of the IITs. And if one semester was 90,000 rupees, now it is 3 lakh rupees. Some of you may be from IITs. You would attest to this fact that as of right now, the fees has increased from 90,000, which was there in 2016-17, to close to 3 lakh rupees today. And in the IIMs, there has been increase of 17 to 30%, from close to 26,000 rupees as the fees for one semester to 56,000 rupees as the fees now. And the idea is 30% doesn't look big. If you give it over 4 semesters, 2 semesters and 6 semesters, and we are not even talking about medical, because medical is already a very big issue. The amount of donation, the amount of money which goes into the medical stream is exponentially much higher. And I think Nandita is telling us that it is 2.9 lakh rupees for BTech in DTU. Previously, Nandita, DTU, or what was used to be called Delhi College of Engineering, used to be part of the Delhi University. The same course which you are doing was actually based on 50,000 rupees for a year. Since DTU and NSIT was basically NSIT and Delhi College of Engineering were brought together, it became DTU. They have exponentially increased the, you can say, fees. Law colleges, yes, in Bangalore, 5 lakh per annum. See, if we talk about private institutions, there are institutions which are taking 8 lakh rupees a semester or a year for a basic BA honors course, which can happen for 50,000 rupees in Delhi University. So there is no doubt that you are the generation who is paying a lot to get basic degrees. So be it the NITs, be it the IITs, be it the IIMs, or be it premier institutions of central universities, or be it private. Private is a separate issue altogether. Now, what he argues is that this has a cascading effect. In the first part, I established to you that there is systemic discrimination and violence within our, what we call a society. In the second part, we all are in agreement that the cost of education in institutions which are considered to be very, very important has increased, if not exponentially, substantially. Can we all agree to that? The 2 points which the author is also trying to argue. We all agree to this, that there is systemic discrimination and there is increase in cost of funding, and therefore it has been transferred to the student. Because now there is no grant in aid, HEFA gives you a loan, therefore the universities are not incentivized to, in a way, subsidize your education, and therefore in turn they are transferring all the load of that loan and its interest on the students and taking fees which are much higher than something which you would have seen, for example, 5 to 6 years back. And the irony of the story is, it is also not that it's inflation adjusted. Inflation has not gone up in that percentage as much as not our salaries, not even the income of our families, but the fees have gone up. There was recently a very interesting, you can say, controversy which happened where a school is taking, school education itself has become a new, you can say, cash grab scam, where the training of the family and the parents is also charged at 16,000 rupees and 1.5 to 3 to 4 lakh rupees for 3 months. 3 months. Why colleges takes loan? Because Lalita, previously colleges used to get UGC grants, but that grant is basically a subsidy. That is a cost to the government. The government does not want to do one, you can say, one-way cash transfer. So what they did was, they said, you want money, we will provide you credit at a low interest, use it and repay it back. So it's not that a college or university wants to do it, it is now the way it is done, which is you need to and have to take a loan at a low interest in that regard. This is the basic landscape in which we live today. Now, what is the impact of this? What is the impact of this? Very important point. The first thing which he argues is, for economically weaker and vulnerable sections, be it the SCs, STs, OBCs, OBC non-creamy obviously, or non-creamy layer, these institutions are becoming only dreams. And this is where it basically undercuts the reservation system also. You can give a reservation, let them enter into these institutions, but what will happen is dropout rates will increase. Because though they will be able to enter the institution because of positive discrimination within the constitution itself, they do not have the money to give the fees. This is where he gives a very interesting data. He argues that in the past 5 years, out of the IITs, out of the IIMs and central universities, 13,500 students have dropped out, and that too specifically out of the SC and ST community and OBC community. And the single-handed reason for that is they are not able to afford the education itself. They get access to it, but now there's an issue of affordability. He gives a very interesting set of data. He breaks it down. He says that 4,596 students from the other backward caste, 2,400 students of SC and 2,600 of ST dropped out in this period from central universities. In IITs, 22,066 OBC students, 1,000 SC students, 400 ST students left. And similarly in the IIMs, you have, though the seat allocation is very low, 163, 188 and 91 students leaving the institution in the past 5 years because they can't afford it. This is a very, very, very high dropout rate. Very big. We don't understand this data, but if you comparatively look at it, they got admission based on their merit, based on reservation, based on anything and everything. But now that the government has in a way empowered them to enter into these institutions, what now makes them leave these institutions, which adds to systemic discrimination, is affordability. And this does not even take into account the fact that how many students of non-reserved category who struggle, their parents struggle, and everybody in that family struggles to keep pace with the changing fees at the school level, at the college level, at the private level. So this does not even include private universities. This only includes the data out of IIT, IIM and central universities, which is IIT government, IIM and you can say central universities, so it's the most subsidized, you can say, institution itself. Dropout rate of 13,500 students is actually quite a lot. So if you are empowering them, then you do not have, or they do not have the capacity to even pay the fees. And if I add to it the fact that the placement rate and percentage has gone down, it is believed that in 2024, 8,000 candidates, 38% of the 23 IITs which are there, they did not get campus placement only. 38% of the students of IITs, 23 IITs which we have, the most premier institutions in India, they did not get any employment after investing such a big amount in their education also. Now this is called a bottleneck. This is called a systemic issue, the government removed its obligation by saying, no, we don't need to subsidize education. They said, we will give you loans at very low interest. But now the cascading effect is that whatever was done or undone in the past 5 years is now going to lead to even further perpetuation of the systemic issues which are there. And Danita again is telling us that is true. So the idea is very simple. What do you do with this information? As always, the question which UPSC will ask you is like this. Systemic barriers along with patterns of funding of higher education in India is increasing the dropout rate. Elaborate. And this also does not take into account the 122 students from the IITs, IIMs and central universities who took their life because either their parents were struggling, they were struggling, or were in a debt trap. It does not take into account the suicides of 122 students who basically came under pressure to either work or take their family out of poverty, or they were being pushed into poverty. This is not even taken into account. This is where this article takes a very gloomy turn and a very, very, you can say, alarming turn. That one small change in the funding patterns of the higher education is now compounding a systemic discrimination which has been perpetuated for centuries. And now we are basically going back to a point where certain communities, though they get access to education, they cannot afford the education itself. So I hope that now you will be able to write a more informed answer here. Because if you don't talk about HEFA, if you don't talk about, and HEFA is actually not mentioned in the article. HEFA I am bringing in. HEFA is one of the biggest issues which India faces today with regards to how our education is becoming more and more expensive. Way forward, straightforward UPSC is that HEFA is not the answer. Creating a NBFC which gives you low interest money is not the way it happens. Rather, you create the grant in aid concept, but then so I'll write it down for you. See, if you have to have a way forward here, firstly, HEFA needs to be reformed. And this loan concept, this credit concept needs to go away. If you want something back, create performance indicators, or when you provide grant in aid, you can also expect the colleges to contribute in some other way, which is they are contributing via human resource, or they're contributing via showing that our performance is becoming better, or they also send the non-used money back so that it is not misappropriated. We can track every rupee, so we can track this also. Second thing is affordability has to be taken into account. Be it college, I would rather say school education needs, you can say, central or state regulations. If the government can make sure that I pay 18% GST on sugar-based popcorn and I can track it also, I think they have the capacity to also create a regulation where they can make ceilings and create ceilings based on income. And I'm not saying that everybody should pay the same fees. If my income is in a certain bracket, I pay a certain type of fees. If my income is only between, for example, below 8 lakh rupees, I only pay, for example, 1 lakh rupees as fees. But if I'm in, for example, 15 to 30, based on your tax, how much tax you pay, based on your Form 16 or declared income, let them pay differentially. If I can earn 50-60 lakh rupees, take 8 lakh rupees from me. Because that is how it should be, right? It cannot be that, as one of you said, 24 lakhs loan to study in an IIM to get a job in which it will take you 2 years to get that, or 3 years to get that 24 lakh rupees back, not taking into account the 14% interest which is there on educational loan. 14% interest is there on education loans. What's the point? That is why a lot of people nowadays are sending their children to America or to the Europe. Why? Because it is equally expensive. And if we have a strata of people in India who have the capacity to pay more, let them pay more. There is a solution. See, let's be very honest. An IAS officer and the permanent and the what we call as, I'll not say the temporary executives because I don't know their educational qualifications, but if you're an IAS officer, you have gone through a rigorous process of selection. If we can track 432 different products and how much GST has to be taken on them, this is the bare minimum which government can do. There is a very important need. This is the moment of intervention where the government has to regulate private education and private educational costs. They have to, because now it is going out of hand. These global schools are taking 13 lakhs, 14 lakhs a year in certain cases. If it's a boarding school, even more. It is much harder to enter into a school today than to enter a college because of the volume of students and the number of schools and their monopolistic behavior. They act like cartels now. If you're from Delhi, if you're from any metropolitan city, you know it. Parents have to run left, right and center to get those points which will give you the admission into schools. Let it be college, separate issue altogether. When will you enter a college? Only when you complete your schooling, right? Getting into a school is a problem. 11 lakhs fees for MBA on educational loan. Well, that is, as I said, this is a topic which we all can connect with. Because we are seeing it happening in front of us, right? So way forward is HEFA has to go or has to be reformed. Second is affordability can be brought in by creating slabs under which differential, you can say, fees can be taken based on the capacity of that person. That can be done. That can easily be done. This is not a rocket science. Are we sorted with this article? This is close to us, something which we understand also quite well. But I hope that this article is something which you will be able to write a good, non-emotional answer, but with good substantial points. HEFA is a point which I am giving you because a lot of people don't know about HEFA. As an assistant professor in Delhi University, I've seen the nature of a college change. The same college, when it was under UGC grads, did not care about a lot of things. In front of me, it went under HEFA. And then you should have seen the way the corporatization of that college happened, that too within Delhi University. I'll not take the name of that college. But the nature of engagement of the principal with the teachers changed. Because now it was about repaying that loan back. So therefore now things which previously did not matter, mattered. There was a given point of time that there was no advertisements within any college in Delhi University. Now go inside a college and check. Every billboard will have something or the other because they are now trying to find spaces where they can actually advertise, because that money is needed to repay that loan which they've taken from HEFA. Any form of expansion of the college, any form of, you can say, reform of that college now needs money. And that money is not coming in grant in it. There cannot be a blanket concept that the money which we sent in grant in aid was being misused. That is not true. There can be misappropriation that can be managed. So the privatization of central universities, of IIMs and the IITs, not privatization per se in governance, but in mindset, is a very big issue. Can we move to the second topic now? This we can have a conversation the whole day, because each one of you most probably has a story to tell me with regards to how your parents, your family, or you yourself are facing issues in this world of what we call as fees going up, without any logic itself, right? Okay. Now, the second topic is related to the Asian elephant, or what are called as Indian elephants. And it's been written by an environmental lawyer and a specialist of the Humane Society International India. And there's an anger in this article. And that anger is with a specific rule change which has happened in March, which is called Captive Elephants Transfer or Transport Rules. Now, there's a lot of static here because she's referring to the Wildlife Protection Act, Schedule 1. So first I need to tell you what is Schedule 1. And she's also talking about some issues which we don't really care about, but are quite interesting. Why am I discussing this topic with you? I was in two minds to do it with you. Because it has been written from a perspective which is a little bit animostic, it may have been a little bit negative for you. But the reason I'm doing it is because in GS paper 3, when it comes to mitigation and conservation activities, you should also understand how small changes can become disastrous. For you and me, an elephant is nothing. We will see it in a religious ceremony. We will see it somewhere here or there. Some of you may not have seen an elephant also. But the idea is, in person, some of you have not seen only. But when it comes to the biodiversity of India, the elephant has been one of the most important indicators and the most important, you can say, symbol of power, from the Dhauli elephant to the elephant-based armies of Magad to Ashoka to the Mauryans to the post-Mauryans to the Guptas. Elephants have been a very integral part of the Indian culture and landscape. Now, what she argues is that one thing is that we have regulations for elephants in wildlife, in what we call today as the concept of in the wild. But there are also a lot of elephants which are in captivity. And the reason for that is either for religious purposes or for entertainment purposes or for tourism. Tourism wise, so we would have seen, you must have gone to a very well-known tourist site. People are now taking what you call as elephant rides, camel rides, horse rides, standard thing. This is the context in which you must have come into contact with an elephant itself. But have you ever thought under what rules is a Schedule 1 Wildlife Protection Act animal actually operating at a tourist spot? It's not that elephants fall under Schedule 3, 4 or 5. They fall under Schedule 1. Now, let me first qualify what does this Schedule 1 mean. See, there are two types of elephants in this, you can say, Indian Ocean world. One is called an African elephant, the other is called an Asian elephant. You can differentiate based on basic physical features. The size is a little bit smaller, and the ears, the way their ears are, the Indian elephant or the Asian elephant has more rounded ears. Now, they are legally protected in India under Schedule 1 of Wildlife Protection Act against poaching, trafficking, and transport and trading. Now, what is the Wildlife Protection Act? The Wildlife Protection Act is a legal framework in which various species of animals and plants are protected in their habitat. There are regulations to control their trade. There are regulations to control their poaching, and there are regulations to even what we call as to seek, you can say, or to even go into a protected area. There are certain rules and regulations which the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 creates. So it is not just for animals, it is for plants also, and it gives different schedules of animals in which how you interact with them matters. In India, since 1992, we also have Project Elephant, which is specifically created by the Ministry of Environment to assist elephant conservation, preservation, and management in India. Management in India. That is an evolutionary concept, Lalita. No specific reason. That's environment based. Now, yeah, Elephant Whisperers was in the news quite a lot because of that. Now, If you are an animal which is quoted in Schedule 1 and 2 of the Wildlife Protection Act, you have high degree of what we call as protection. Mostly endangered species are pushed into Schedule 1 and 2. There is high protection, very high restriction, harshest of penalties when it comes to violation of poaching, you can say trafficking, and even selling any item related to these animals is covered under 1 and 2. If an animal is under 1 and 2, it is rigorously protected. So for example, the black buck, snow leopard, Himalayan bear, Asiatic cheetah, the Himalayan black bear, the Asiatic elephant in India, all fall under this Schedule 1 and 2. So under this, you cannot hunt or kill any of this animal unless it is threat to human life or it has a disease. That is where in human to animal contact, if a village kills a tiger or what we call as a lion, the villagers are not arrested under Schedule 1 because that is to protect human life. Schedule 1 and 2 are rigorous, the most you can say stringent when it comes to the schedules. Then you have Schedule 3 and 4. Under Schedule 3 and 4, the penalties come down. The penalties come down. Mostly in those two, you have critically endangered. In this, you have vulnerable, you can say, species being protected. For example, chital, the blue sheep, the sambar. These are under Schedule 3 and 4. Equal protection, but penalties are lower. Schedule 5 is the only animal which you can kill without any consequence because they are considered vermin. Vermin is, they are animals which can destroy either food, plant, or are spreading diseases. For example, crows, fruit bats, rats, mice, they are considered to be, they can be killed. If, for example, rats and mice would be in 3rd or 4th or 1st or 2nd schedule, the rat kill which you find in the supermarket would not be available only. You can get poison for rats because rats are not protected. They are under Schedule 5, can be killed because they are a threat to human life. And therefore, any vermin is allowed to be killed under Schedule 5. And Schedule 6 is related to plants, which is restriction on cultivation, possession, sale and transportation of certain plants. This is the backstory. If you've done environment, this is a revision for you. If you've not done environment, we have a very rigorous, you can say, legal framework under which you can't actually do this to anyone, which is every animal in India is either Schedule 5, 3, 4, 1, 2, if it is vulnerable in some form or the other or is a threat to humans. So I hope you understand what is the importance of the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. Are we clear about this? This is pure static. I should have presumed that you know this, but I'm still telling you that 6 is about plants, first 5 are related to animals, 5 allows you to kill certain animals, and thereafter 1, 2, 3, 4, you are protected. You are protected. Are we on the same page with regards to this? Now I'm entering what she is trying to argue, because she said elephants are protected under Schedule 1 of Wildlife Protection Act 1972. If that is the case, now she says, why are the rules and regulations which have been notified in March of 2024 about captive elephants transport and transfer rules so ambiguous? And she points out 3 very big glaring issues. First, she says that an elephant which is considered to be captive, meaning it is owned by a person, change of ownership is seen as welfare for the animal if the owner cannot maintain that animal. Which is, we have this proverbial saying in North India and generally that what are you trying to do? You are trying to feed an elephant. So if you really can't feed an elephant, if you do not have the capacity to do that, then what is the point of keeping that elephant? And therefore, the idea is that you can transfer the animal from one owner to the other. But this transfer, should it be commercial in nature? Meaning that I can deliberately say that I cannot maintain this animal, and you can buy it on this pretext. Should the transfer of captive elephants be based on the concept actually of commercial transfer? The answer to that question is pure no. But this is where this act is extremely ambiguous. It allows for transfer of ownership of an elephant from one to the other in a non-commercial and a commercial context both. And therefore, an elephant now is nothing like a movable property for that person. So if it states that when an owner is no longer able to maintain an elephant, the ownership of that elephant may be transferred. However, there is no obligation for this exchange to be non-commercial. This means the Schedule 1 animal is your private property. This is the first issue. I hope you realize the severity of this loophole. This means I can automatically say, I can't take care of this elephant, you take it. Ownership of elephant can now be based on an elephant can therefore become like a movable property, like a car, like a house. And this is not properly notified. Any transfer should have been a non-commercial context, not in a commercial context. The second loophole which she points out is that there is no ban on the transport of elephants between two states on the basis of temporary transfer or permanent transfer. Meaning how you lend your car, under this act you can lend your elephant also. So in states which have a lot of privately owned elephants, they can send their elephants as props, as property for religious ceremonies and weddings, and thereafter they can bring them back. This is where this whole act is undercutting Schedule 1. It is allowing for commercial transfer between 1 and 2, but it is also saying that this transfer can be temporary. You want an elephant for your wedding? Take it. I have it. Give me some money. I will then take it back. Why are we perpetuating a commercial space in which elephants can be used as wedding props, and it is a Schedule 1 animal of the Wildlife Protection Act 1972? It is absurd that you allow such glaring gaps in a legislation which is so important. Further, it says in the third instance that every elephant under Project Elephant which is in captivity has a chip. So they basically track the total number of elephants which are under captivity. Total number is 2,675. Now tell me one thing. And I'm going to ask you this question in a very genuine way. Poaching and hunting and capturing an elephant under Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act is allowed? Yes or no? Give me the answer to that. Schedule 1 allows for you going to the jungle and getting an elephant? The answer to that question is yes or no. Everybody says no. Great. Perfect. Very good point. Now, if I have a finite number, 2,675 elephants under captivity, does an elephant live forever? Will an elephant live forever? What is the answer to that question? It will not live forever. Okay. So this number should eventually go up or down. The captive number should go up or down over 15 to 20, 30 years. This number should go down because captive elephants will die and I cannot get a new elephant because it is not allowed under Schedule 1. Then how is that this number is constant? If we have microchips which tell us the child inheritance rate, the captive reproduction rate of elephants is very low, there has to be an eventual dip and then increase. Good point. Very good point, that they have captive elephant reproduction, which in turn leads to more children within the elephants. But that is a very rare case in commercial space. This is where she says, what is actually happening in India today is, the rules don't stop anybody from taking the microchip off from an captive elephant and then putting it on a new elephant, which is so slam dunk wrong that basically this number is not decreasing, because they are replacing the elephants and they are putting the same chip on that elephant. The rules do not require the submission of the post-mortem report of that elephant, leaving a critical gap in monitoring and accountability. This cycle perpetuates either captivity of the calves, or there should be a rule that if an elephant dies, the chip should be destroyed. And don't tell me that the people who are associated with the Project Elephant have till not now realized that number is not decreasing only. 2,675 last year, then after 10 years also 2,600. Let's not be that innocent to think that they are thinking that they're keeping the elephants in such good health that they're not dying only. The rule should have simply been that if a captive elephant dies, the chip should be destroyed with it. They're rather taking the chip out and putting it in the new elephant. Which means, where are you getting the new elephant from? Which means, you are undercutting the Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act. So, isn't this an issue which should have been flagged by this point? And if we are bringing in rules in 2024, why are we perpetuating illegal captivity of elephants considered to be sacred in India plus a Schedule 1 animal? So the three things which she is pointing out is, elephants in captivity can be traded as movable property. I'm trying to summarize it for you. Second, she's saying is that there is no rule against temporary transfer of elephants, which means that you can now create a business out of this, because the first one says there's no issue of non-commercial and commercial. Therefore, you can have 50 elephants and send it across India. And third is, if your 50 elephants, 2-3 die, you go and get a new elephant, remove the chip of the elephant and give it to them. Therefore, if a question on these lines comes in, which is, there are glaring gaps and loopholes in the protective regime of the elephants in India, elaborate. I hope you will be able to now identify three major issues. This is why I wanted to do this article, because it gives you a very interesting insight into things which really don't matter to you and me. But next time when you see an elephant in a public space, do remember that that elephant has a chip inside it. And that elephant may not be from that state itself, may have been transported across India in order to be there. So I hope you are now in that space to write a good answer for this question. A lot of fodder. Please do note these points. You will not find it in books. This is why reading the newspaper becomes important. So we've done two very important articles, heavy articles. One education and the other one what is called as elephant regime and the WPA Act. We are on the same page with regards to that. Why they used chips? Because if they can't, nobody can issue a new chip. So they use the used chip only. Okay. Now moving on from this article, smaller topics, simpler topics. We know that the government of India has removed the no detention rules, which were recently, you can say, removed from the NEP, National Education Policy of 2020. And now at 5th class and 8th class, you can be, in a way, detained. Now, when this concept was introduced, it was introduced under this concept of the right to education, and two words were used when it was introduced. One is called Continuous and Comprehensive Evaluation, CCE, And the second one is called no detention policy, meaning if a student through a continuous process of evaluation is not able to ascertain, or the teacher is not able to ascertain that he or she should be moved from 5th to 6th and 8th to 9th, he will not be stopped. The idea was a lot of pressure is created on children, which in turn leads to this idea that the final examination is coming. We all know that very well. As UPSC aspirants, we know how that day becomes very important. So the idea was at a very young age, it makes no sense to have this final exam. Let's have a continuous evaluation process. If that continuous evaluation process is able to create a certain regime in which we can assess the overall development of the student, we will not detain. But what has happened is that it is believed that because of no detention policy, therein now glaring fundamental gaps between students with basic numeracy and literacy. Meaning, because we did not stop anybody from going anywhere and the CCE was very vague, students were allowed to reach till 10th class, 12th class with not even understanding addition, subtraction or multiplication. So this is the policy which was talked about, which is the CCE, which is comprehensive continuous evaluation. Don't evaluate them once, evaluate them continuously. Do not detain them. And the idea was this should help children have better mental strength and mental health, and therefore we don't need to create pressure in schools. Now the idea was this should have worked, but it did not. So based on the principle that in reality now we have children who do not understand what they actually did because they knew they will never fail. So the idea was, with no fear of failure, everybody became complacent. So what did the government of India do? It removed the no detention campaign or the no detention rule. So do we understand the logic of removing it? The logic was because there is now glaring gaps in learning evaluation, let's remove no detention. Now, this is where the NEP and the detention policy are now at odds. The government is arguing that we are doing it under 2019 National Education Policy. And this is a very interesting point, that this now detention policy is actually a paradox in this regime. How is it a paradox? NEP says that there should be holistic, continuous evaluation based on multiple indicators. And the idea was final exam pressure should be diluted. But now if I'm in the 5th and 8th class, if I don't clear the exam, I will give in 2 months. Then I will be detained if I don't clear the first and the second examination. The idea is nobody should be expelled, but everybody should be detained if they're not able to clear the exam twice. Now this basically is incongruent to one another. This is called, the spirit of the NEP is not getting captured in the detention policy itself. NEP said holistic multi-continuous evaluation. CCE is gone and no detention is gone. So this policy goes directly against the principles of what the government said in 2019 and what it is saying in 2024. So does WPA does not have 4 schedules. It 1, 2, 3. I've done 3 and 4 together. 5 is vermin, 6 is applants. So it has 6 schedules, not 4. So very simply, this is where we are seeing an incongruence. Now, bringing the first topic here, in private sector and in urban areas, it would be very difficult to detain a student and then expel him because he was non-performing, because people understand what is the detention policy. You cannot be expelled. But tell me one thing, in rural India, cannot the detention policy be used against the same communities we were talking about by saying that he's a non-performing student? See, he did not clear the first examination, second examination, third examination. Cannot detention become a process of regressing a whole community itself? Think of it. Think of it. How you can weaponize the detention policy to thereafter impact a certain community and increase the dropout rate itself. This is where this article says the letter and the spirit is different, and maybe the new detention policy is something which is not needed. Now, how do you see it in the examination is from this perspective. The new detention policy is against the spirit of NEP 2020 discuss. The question is, in spirit it is different. But what I'm more concerned about is, this detention policy can now be used by upper caste teachers who have a certain caste-based consciousness to detain and then justify expelling and actually create learner-based gaps between communities itself. This is the problem with this policy, and therefore, though it says you cannot do it, who is going to go to a school teacher and say, see, NEP policy says no, detention policy is no. See, the government of India says no. As it is, we have children not being allowed to sit with these other children in the schools. They're not allowed to drink from the same pot. Now you are telling me that they can also be detained at 5 and 8 because they didn't clear the examination twice. And thereafter, I can create a perpetual cycle where some communities are within school because of detention. That was the whole concept of CCE, which is actually also envisaged in NEP. Yes, there is fundamental problem, but this is called a high-handed approach. No detention leads to no evaluation, remove no detention. Rather than reforming the system, you just remove the system. So how do we evaluate continuously in NEP? That is a standard concept that extracurricular activities should be taken into consideration. NEP was notified in 2019, came into force in 2020, deductivist. 2020 is the regulation, 2019 is when the committee was established to talk about it. How to see, continuous evaluation is a very simple concept, which is that you take extracurricular activities, arts, and you have small tests happening across the year rather than having one test in the end of the year. So for example, test series is continuous evaluation. What we tell you, why am I telling you UCSC is because of this only, right? UCSC is a part of your process of continuous evaluation. If you prepare for UPSC and go and sit in the UPSC examination without giving any test, that is the dumbest thing which you will do, because that is where you have not continuously evaluated yourself. Continuous evaluation is a part of UPSC preparation because that allows you to evaluate yourself itself. So, yeah, see, the way forward is we need reform. Satyam, sure. But the point is, this is not the way to reform it. This is not the way to reform it. Right? So, you will be able to write an answer for this? Yes or no? Because people are talking about this in very positive light. The negative, where you have to critically evaluate this concept, may not be with you in that context. Okay. Now, we had a very interesting article which argued, this is a small point, not a very big point that was. It argues that household spending has increased by 3.5% between August and July of 2023 and 2024. Now, this is based on what is called as the Household Consumption Expenditure Survey, which is conducted by the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, the MOSPI. It basically holds this Household Consumption Expenditure Survey. Now, let me break down this concept for you in the next 5 minutes. What is consumption? Consumption is you have an income, it is a disposable income, you go and buy things, you are consuming. So you have food items as consumption, non-food items as consumption. Consumption is good for the economy because it creates demand and therefore keeps the economy out of a deflationary cycle or recession. But overconsumption is also not good, because that could lead to inflation, because the demand is now over exceeding supply and you have demand pull inflation in that regard. Now, what this article actually says is that in rural India, there is an increase of 3.5% year on year from 2,000 rupees as what we call as expenditure. And in urban area, that increases 3.48%. What matters to me in this article is not this data. What matters to me is this. The government of India is arguing that by looking at this data, we can say that there's a consumption inequality between rural and urban is ending. Now, this is a concept which becomes important for you. What is consumption inequality? Now, I'll give you an example and you'll understand it. I have person A, I have person B. A gets 1 lakh rupees, B gets 1 lakh rupees. A is able to spend 90,000 out of this 1 lakh, but B has the capacity, he saves, she saves, and they go to the, you can say the market where you get a lot of subsidized wholesale commodities, and they only spend 50,000 out of this 1 lakh. With the same disposable income, can I say that both of them are equal? Can I say that? Both are equal. On paper, both are equal because they have the same income. But if I look at the consumption pattern, it turns out that it isn't, because maybe A has a socio-economic context in which he and she can spend more, whilst B is spending less because of the pressures on B. Maybe the EMIs are there, maybe the school fees is there, that way. This is called consumption inequality. And in India, the issue is that there's an inequality between rural and urban. Meaning, the consumption of rural India is much lower. And you can see this data that in urban household, the expenditure has increased by 3.48% to 6,000 rupees. But in rural India, it is still 2,000, 3 times less than the urban sector. Meaning, in rural India, I spend out of my disposable income 2,000 rupees, but in urban areas, I'm spending 7,000 rupees out of my income. And because there's a mismatch for the first time, which is 3.53% increase in rural India and 3.48% in urban area, now the government of India has come up with this beautiful concept. Because 5.3 and 0.48, there's a difference. Rural India is catching up with urban India. Still, there's a 3 times difference in the amount, but the consumption inequality in India is now being removed. So the whole point of discussing this article was to introduce this concept, which refers to an uneven distribution of spending on goods and services across different income groups, especially meaning that some people spend significantly more on consumption than others, reflecting a disparity in the living standards, even if their income levels might be the same or may not be drastically be different. It may be that there is economic inequality which we cannot look through income, but we can look through consumption. Meaning, I may not be able to figure it out through income, but I may be able to figure it out through consumption. Sorted? Everyone? Make sense? What is consumption inequality? We understand this also? Okay. Now, a study from the IIMs has pointed out, since we have smart classrooms, there has been a 22% increase in the what we call as enrollments in schools itself. Again, Inspirational Hub, you are talking about protected 4 schedules, Vermin 5th schedule, 6th schedule related to plants. So I know what you're referring to. Yes, you are also right. I am also right. You are talking about the first 4 schedules which protect animals, and 5th is for vermin, 6th is for plants. So it's okay, no issues. So the argument which has come through recently from a study is that under the Smart Cities mission, 19 cities have been able to increase their enrollment numbers by 22% because they were able to introduce smart classrooms. Smart classrooms mean that they're using projectors, they're using, you can say, tablets, they're using laptops, they're using smart tools, they're using, you can say, smart boards. And that is where the 71 cities have developed 9,433 smart classrooms, in which highest number of smart projects were in Karnataka, then Rajasthan, then Tamil Nadu, then Delhi. Least was in West Bengal with only 2. And under the Smart Cities project, we talk about the concept of using technology as a way of finding solutions for e-governance, waste management, urban mobility, and education. And a very important point here is that with 91% of most smart city missions project now under completion, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs has now started a certain outreach program under which you have what is called as SAR, SAAR, Smart Cities and Academics Towards Action and Research. Basically, IIM Bangalore is doing this under the concept that what we are trying to understand is that how did these things impact us? So SAR is basically publishing all the smart cities missions outcomes under Samiksha series in that regard. So that is where smart cities mission, we are now trying to see tangible outcomes. One tangible outcome is with smart classrooms, more students want to get enrolled because their outcomes are better, their learning process is better. And this is a very interesting point on behalf of the what we call as Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, that see, we have tangible change. This is just an update for a scheme. You can use this data wherever you want to, but it is believed that when technology is used in education, there is a better outcome in that regard. Thereafter, China has assured us that they are not going to use the Brahmaputra dam against us. Bangladesh and India have nothing to worry about because China has no history whatsoever of weaponizing dams, or we have pure trust on China that China says we will not use the water in the dam on the Brahmaputra. I'll tell you which dam, 3 times bigger than their biggest dam, because they are saying that we will cooperate, and we have studied the disaster and research of what is going to happen environmentally, ecologically. There is nothing to worry about. China telling us, don't worry, I will not use it. This is basically Pakistan promising that I will stop funding terrorism. Don't worry, we will stop it. Leave it to me. I will make sure every terrorist in Pakistan is dead. This is basically China trying to internationally say India and Bangladesh have nothing to fear about, because we have done $137 billion we are pushing into a sector where for 50-60 kilometers there's nothing. We will generate 60,000 megawatt of energy, and we will have a gravity dam. But please don't worry. Do not worry. We will not do anything to India and Bangladesh. This is basically based on a very dangerous dam which they're developing on Sangpo, which is basically Brahmaputra river. We know that the Brahmaputra river entering through the Arunachal sector, thereafter meeting the Ganga in Bengal and Bangladesh, in turn entering the Bay of Bengal. It's a very important river for the northeastern sector. But what the Chinese are doing is that they've already developed one dam here. And they want to develop one dam just before the point Brahmaputra turns into India. That is called the Midong Dam. Midong Dam is to be considered to be the biggest project which the Chinese will come up with, under which they have the Three Gorges Dam on the Yangtze River. It is 3 times bigger than that, and it is going to be a gravity dam. Now, I don't know how dumb China, no, they're not dumb, they're smart. The idea is that it's a seismically active area. Himalayan sector itself is still 3 centimeters going up every year. Earthquakes are known in this sector. In an earthquake prone area, you do not make a gravity dam. You make a run of the river dam, which is that basically you use this force of the river to then push the turbines, rather than creating an obstruction in which you will save the water and then push it through turbines. Gravity dams are never considered to be the best option in a tectonically active sector. As one of you said, zone 5. Now the problem is this dam, with the Midong Dam, has 3 problems. One very glaring. There is already a dam called the Zangmu Dam, which is on the same river. The biggest issue with this dam is 2. First, it is tectonically active. Second, it is a very fragile ecosystem. When you will create a gravity dam, when you will obstruct and store the water, you will stop the movement of the wildlife. You will then, in a seismically active area, create a gravity dam which also impacts the plate tectonics of that area, because holding so much water will create pressure on that area itself. And they are saying, no, 60,000 megawatt, we have to reach our NDC, save the earth, global warming. India said that if you really are so concerned about generating electricity, use runoff river. But the biggest issue is that China can use this to do 2 things. First is it can stop the water flow in the lower riparian states. Therefore, it can induce a drought in the whole of the Assam plains. At the same point of time, we don't have any issues with China. Why aisa kabhi? Have we fought with China ever? No. Beautiful relationship. Who says that the Chinese cannot release all this water in one go and flood the whole of the northeast sector? But no, Chinese will never do it. Will never do it. I trust the Chinese. They're saying, trust us. We have studied the ecological impact. We have studied the disaster impact. And when have we weaponized any form of technology against you? Antimony we are not able to send you because ship petrol is not there. We are basically holding on to the rare earth metals, which I've been discussing for you for the past 3 to 4 classes. We don't manipulate trade and we don't weaponize trade. So how will we weaponize a dam? So Mao Ning says, nothing to worry about. We all can sleep perfectly fine, because the Chinese say everything is perfect. Koi baat nahi. They don't have to worry only. China will not use it against India, and therefore we should be helping Chinese meeting their nationally determined goals and letting this project go forward. This is where India is thinking that they will bring a dam in the Siang River, so that if a lot of water is released into the Brahmaputra, maybe it will be able to control it. The point is, it is a major grave concern. It is a concern for the Chinese more than if today there's a crack in this dam because of seismic activities. The biggest impact will be in Bangladesh and India only. Because it's an upper riparian state, it does not face any form of risk also. So therefore, India has been objecting to this dam on a very serious note for a very long time, saying that seismically active area can be weaponized, very dangerous for the ecosystem. Please, let's not go with this. But the Chinese have now pushed in $137 billion into this, and they are going to do it for sure. In the larger perspective of things in the world, they are saying, trust us, Chinese are the most trustworthy people. Please don't tell us that we should not do this because we can weaponize it. Now, this is a matter of concern for you. This is a matter of concern for India. We will get editorials on this very soon. But the point is, I hope that you now understand the geography in which this is happening and the implications of it. Just to check your knowledge of the Brahmaputra river, I'm going to push a poll and you are going to answer this question. We're going to push a poll now. Consider the following: Subansiri, Lohit, Kameng and Manas. Which of the above are the tributaries of the Brahmaputra river? Only one of them, only two of them, only three of them, or all of them? The poll should be in front of you now. Okay. After this, just one small point and we'll end this session. Come on, everybody has to take part in this. Everybody has to give the answer. Nobody leaks the answer. All of them are giving the wrong answer only. Don't look at what they are doing. Look at your own answers. Okay. Whoever is writing in the chat section is wrong. Don't worry about that. Okay, we'll end the poll here. Okay. Most of you were correct. The percentages are just going to come in front of me. 51% of you are totally correct. All of them are tributaries of the Brahmaputra river. Very important point. Please now learn the right bank and the left bank tributaries of Brahmaputra will become relevant for the examination. Please, So do learn this. If you don't know it, the right and the left bank, you should be able to get. Okay. Shiva, soon. Okay. Last point and last article. If you have a phobia of syringes, IIT-Bombay has a solution for you. They are coming up with needleless injections, painless injections, which will be using the concept of what is called as a shock syringe. The idea is they are going to use the concept of pressure waves, which will carry the medication into your body. There will be no need for a needle. There will be no incision made. This will be kept on your skin through pressure waves, like the shock waves which happen via sonic booms. They will be able to permeate the skin and transfer it into your blood veins and your veins in that regard. And therefore, let's see when this is in the market. But shock syringes are now a new concept which is coming through, and IIT-Bombay is the one which is developing it, which is using compressed air and pressure to push the medication through your veins. So on this note, I'll end the session. We discussed systemic discrimination, the HEFA, the affordability of education in India, the problem with regards to the elephant, and you can say how there are multiple glaring problems in the litigation related to it. Under WPA Act, it is considered under Schedule 1. A lot of you are right. 4 schedules are there. Sure, 4 schedules for animals, 1 for vermin, and the 6th for plants. And thereafter, we discussed the concept of shock-based, you can say, syringes. We are also the ones who discussed the concept of how in India, we are now facing issues with regards to the difference between NEP and the no detention policy. And in that regard, a lot of discussion today has happened about the education sector. So I hope that you will use this for the examination. So thank you, and I will see you tomorrow or day after with another set of issues. Take care.